Gator Tales present. For true scary stories from night shift workers. The world changes when the sun goes down. Familiar places take on an unsettling aura, and the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Join me as we explore 4 harrowing tales from night shift workers, stories that will make you think twice about what lurks in the quiet hours. Story 1: The Security Guard's Nightmare. I've been a security guard at this sprawling factory complex in Detroit for about 6 months now. It's not the most glamorous job, but it's steady, and it pays the bills. Most of my shift is spent watching camera feeds, ensuring no one wanders where they shouldn't. It's usually incredibly quiet, just me and a labyrinth of empty buildings. My routine involves the overnight shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which I've been doing since I started. It's a challenge for my sleep schedule, but I manage. This factory is ancient, a relic from the old auto parts manufacturing days. Most sections are dormant, with only a few buildings still operational. At night, it transforms into a realm of shifting shadows and faint echoes, often punctuated by the scuttling of rats. My shift begins with a thorough check of all the doors, making sure they're securely locked. Then, I retreat to the security office, nursing coffee and monitoring the screens. Every couple of hours, I conduct a patrol, sweeping my flashlight into the dark corners. Honestly, it's mundane work, but it's a paycheck. However, one particularly frigid Michigan night, the kind of cold that seeps into your very bones, everything changed. I was on my 3rd cup of coffee, feeling the fatigue of poor sleep from the day before. As I stared at the monitors, I caught a glimpse of something on camera 3, near the back loading dock. It was a shadow, moving swiftly, stealthily. I leaned closer, squinting, but the darkness made it impossible to discern. I initially dismissed it, thinking it might be nothing, but then I saw it again, darting across the screen. With a sigh, I grabbed my flashlight and jacket and headed out. The factory grounds at night are a confusing maze of large, old structures with narrow alleys winding between them. I swept my light around, checking the loading dock. The door was shut, no signs of forced entry. I then inspected the fence. It was intact, no breaches. I concluded it must have been just the wind rustling some debris, and I was about to head back when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible snicker. I froze, listening intently. Then, from the deep shadows, they emerged. There were 4 or 5 of them, all wearing masks, like something out of a Halloween nightmare. I could tell they were young by their jerky, hyperactive movements, like kids wired on sugar. One of them shoved me hard, sending me stumbling backward, nearly dropping my flashlight. Before I could even register what was happening, another punched me in the gut, a blow so forceful it stole my breath. I doubled over, gasping, and then they were all over me, a pack of wild animals, hitting and kicking. I tried to retaliate, even swinging my flashlight at one of them, but they were too quick. Someone snatched it away. Another punched me in the face. I felt my nose crack and the warm, metallic taste of blood fill my mouth. I tried to yell, but the blows kept raining down, knocking me off my feet. Someone kicked my legs out from under me, and I fell hard onto the gravel, pain searing through my knees and hands. But they didn't stop. Kicks landed on my ribs, my back, my arms. I curled up, attempting to shield my head, but it offered little protection. The pain was excruciating, and I could hear them laughing, loud and maniacal, as if this were some twisted game. It was sickening, the joy they seemed to derive from it. They behaved like children, but vicious ones, the kind who would tear the wings off a fly just to watch it writhe. Their sheer indifference, their enjoyment, terrified me more than the pain itself. This assault continued for what felt like an eternity, though it couldn't have been. Finally, One of them delivered a crushing blow to my head, and everything went black, a sudden, absolute nothingness, as if a switch had been flipped. When I awoke, it was still dark and bitterly cold. I lay on the ground, my face pressed into the gravel. My head throbbed, and the coppery taste of blood lingered in my mouth. I tried to move, but my entire body screamed in protest. My ribs felt like they were on fire, and my hands were unresponsive. I spat out blood and fragments of teeth. They had done a thorough job. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. The attackers were gone, vanished without a trace. My clothes were torn, and my shoes were missing, my Air Jordans, 96 edition. I checked for my wallet, it was still in my pocket. They hadn't wanted money, just to inflict harm. I slowly and shakily got to my feet, dizzy as hell. Every step was agonizing, but I leaned against the wall, stumbling my way back to the office. I tripped repeatedly, my legs weak, my ribs stabbing me with every breath. Finally, I made it to the security office, collapsing into the chair. My hands trembled so violently I could barely dial 911. I mumbled something about being attacked, gave them the address, and then just sat there, trying desperately not to pass out again. Paramedics arrived quickly, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. They loaded me onto a stretcher, asking what happened, but my jaw was too painful to speak. They transported me to the hospital, where I spent several days, bandaged from head to toe. The doctor confirmed broken ribs, a concussion, fractured fingers, and a severely battered face. They even extracted some teeth. They gave me painkillers and told me I was lucky it wasn't worse, but I certainly didn't feel lucky. The police came by while I was recovering, an older detective and a younger one. They asked me to describe my assailants, but I had little to offer. Their faces were masked, and it was dark. I told them they were young, fast, and laughed like maniacs, but that was all. They took notes and said they'd investigate, but I never heard from them again. I suppose I knew they wouldn't find those kids. Detroit has too many shadows for hiding. After a few days, I was discharged. I was still in pain, unable to do much beyond sitting around. Work was out of the question, for sure. I had 2 kids depending on me, and I didn't know how I would pay the bills. My 8-year-old daughter cried when she saw me bruised and bandaged. My 12-year-old son tried to act tough, but I could tell he was shaken. I told them I'd had an accident at work. I didn't want them to be scared by the truth. My sister, a nurse, came over, bringing food and changing my bandages. I hated needing her help, but I couldn't manage alone. Getting out of bed each day was a struggle, my ribs aching, my broken fingers making it hard to grip anything. I felt useless, unable to care for myself, let alone my children. I kept replaying that night in my mind. Why did they do it? Just for kicks. I'd never harmed anyone, I was just doing my job. It made no sense. My boss called, expressed his regrets, and mentioned adding more security, perhaps another guard. It offered little comfort. The other guards, when I finally returned to work, clapped me on the shoulder, saying they were glad I was okay, but I saw the worry in their eyes. No one wanted to imagine it could happen to them next. The police never caught those kids, and probably never will. It tears me up that they got away clean while I'm left with these scars. It just isn't right, but what can I guess? Life isn't fair, I guess. I'm more careful now, always looking around, anticipating trouble. Maybe that's good. It keeps me sharp. But it also showed me how quickly things can turn, and how you can't always stop it. I just keep going, for my kids, for myself. There's no other choice. Story 2, The Cab Driver's Terrifying Fare. I grew up in Modesto during the 1980s, and, to be honest, I ended up entangled with a less than ideal crowd. Some of my friends wound up in jail, others ended up in the grave. But the ones I truly admired were those who managed to break free before the life we lived became an inescapable anchor. I decided to clean up my act, and since driving had always been my passion, I figured a job at a cab company would be a way to earn an honest living while still navigating the city I knew and loved. By 1991, at 24 years old, I'd been ferrying passengers around Modesto for nearly 2 years. It was quite a job, let me tell you. Every so often, I'd pick up a real character. Like this one time, a gruff-voiced, diminutive man flagged me down. When I inquired about his story, it turned out he was Sonny Barger, a founding member of the Hells Angels. I asked why he wasn't on his bike, and he looked me dead in the eye through the rearview mirror and quipped, "Because I've had 14 beers, 5 shots of tequila, and I'm too goddamn old to spend the night in jail." I burst out laughing. He was a fantastic tipper, too. But not every passenger was as cool or entertaining. In fact, I picked up 1 or 2 in my time who landed me in a world of trouble. This is one of those stories. It was August 2nd, 1991, around 8:30 p.m. The sun had just dipped below the horizon. I was driving down the avenue, about to merge onto Highway 108 towards downtown. It was a Friday, so I knew it would be a busy night. Just as I was turning, I spotted a young woman on the roadside, thumb extended to passing cars. My first thought was that it was no time to be hitchhiking, especially on a Friday or Saturday night when things always got a little wilder. So, I pulled over next to her, honked my horn. Before I could even ask her destination, she blurted out, "I don't have any money, sorry, I just really need a ride." Her voice was shaky, and I could tell she'd been crying. Instead of driving off like a jerk, I told her to hop in and that I'd give her a free ride. "Oh my God, really? Oh, thank you so much," she responded, her gratitude so profound it sounded like she was about to cry again. She climbed into the back seat, then told me she needed to go to the airport. I introduced myself, asked her name, and as we drove, I cautiously inquired if she was okay, a gentle way of asking what was wrong without being too forward. She explained that she had just broken up with her boyfriend of 3 years and was heading to the airport to catch a plane to Florida, where her grandparents lived. I told her how sorry I was but added that she'd be surprised how many young women like her I gave rides to weekly, sometimes even daily. It's a sad reality that relationships sometimes shatter, and when they do, someone usually pulls the old Hail Mary, full of grace, "Get me out of this goddamn place," and that's where yours truly comes in. She didn't laugh, and I didn't expect her to. After my clumsy attempt at humor, I offered a listening ear if she wanted to talk. She took a moment to compose herself before speaking, a slow start, as if she didn't know where to begin. But once she got going, she really got going. I stayed quiet, letting her talk, listening to her story. She had moved to California from the East Coast for college, met her boyfriend in her junior year, and then moved in with him after graduation when she needed a place to stay. She said he had been the perfect gentleman when they first met, supporting her emotionally through her final 2 years of college, then financially for a while after she graduated and was looking for a job. He had always been kind and patient. But over time, while she was still trying to find work, he began to change. He became less patient and more aggressive. They never used to fight at all, but eventually, they were fighting 2 or 3 times a week. She mentioned that her chosen field was highly competitive, and despite her tireless efforts sending out resumes and making calls, she wasn't having any luck. The longer this went on, the more impatient her boyfriend became, and it spiraled into a huge source of tension, with him accusing her of not contributing. She was looking for waitressing jobs right around the time they had their massive breakup fight. By then, her boyfriend was completely disinterested. He told her to pack her bags, started throwing some of her belongings around, and then things escalated, ending violently before she fled the house with her packed suitcase. My own father used to get violent with my mom before he abandoned her, so as soon as she mentioned that last detail, I was ready to drive back to wherever she'd come from, give her ex a thorough ass kicking, and then bring her back to the airport. I told her I was sorry things ended that way, then asked if she was alright, if she needed me to take her to the hospital first, or anything like that. She said no, that he hadn't really hurt her. But then I asked if she wanted me to stop so she could call the police, and for the first time, she gave me an immediate, desperate reply, no. That was the first warning sign, the moment I realized I might have gravely misjudged the situation. I told her that if he'd hit her or destroyed any of her possessions, it was crucial to report it to the police, at least to have it on record. But she insisted I just drive her to the airport so she could leave and go to her grandparents. At the time, I thought I understood the impulse. The poor girl had just endured something traumatic, she didn't want to recount the play-by-play to a bunch of strangers. She just wanted to escape. But as I said, there was something about that "no" that sounded a little too desperate. I asked if she had done anything, like hit him back, which might explain her reluctance to involve the law. But I was also quick to reassure her that the police would consider anything she did in self-defense to be just that, self-defense. She started to say they wouldn't see it that way, but when I pressed her for a reason, she snapped, because they won't. Alright, now can you just take me to the airport? I'm begging you. She began with a cold, angry tone, but by the time she reached the "I'm begging you" part, she was back to sounding like a terrified little girl. I guess that tugged at my heartstrings enough for me to back down a little, though not enough to drop it entirely. I remained silent for a moment or two, giving her space to breathe, then suggested that if her ex had indeed hit her, the best revenge would be for him to spend a night in a jail cell. Then she muttered, "That's not going to happen." I didn't grasp the true meaning of that statement, so I followed up with something like, "Are you really going to let this piece of trash treat you like this?" That's when she said, with a heavy tone that sent shivers down my spine, "He's not going to do anything to anyone anymore." Bingo. Their fight had indeed ended in violence, but not with this girl's ex assaulting her. It ended with her doing something to him. And the way she said that last part, about him not doing anything anymore, made me suspect she'd done more than just slap him. I began, "Miss, if you did something bad, I have to let you out of the cab. Otherwise, you're making me an accessory to whatever's going on." I wasn't 100% sure that was legally true, but I'd heard it enough times, and it was enough for me to say. I also added that if all she did was toss a lamp at him or something to keep him away, then fine, I'd take her to the airport. But if she did something else, if she left him bleeding and in need of a hospital, then that was a completely different story. As I waited for her answer, I heard rustling in the back. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and I saw her reaching into her jacket seconds before I heard the distinct click of a handgun being armed. I'd been robbed 3 times in 2 years by that point, so I knew that sound well enough to recognize that the girl I'd initially believed to be an innocent victim of domestic abuse had just pulled a gun on me from the back seat. I remember the words, "Well, there, miss, there's no need to do anything rash," coming out of my mouth without conscious effort. Then, that same shaky, teary-eyed voice returned as she said, "Just take me to the airport. I don't want to do anything to you, so please don't make me. I just want to get out of here." I didn't ask her anything else. God, I wanted to, but I valued my life far more than I valued getting any more answers. I figured there might be a chance some poor guy was lying on his kitchen floor, bleeding to death with a bullet in his gut. Maybe a scumbag who hit his girlfriend deserved to suffer a little, but I don't believe in the death penalty. More than anything, I wanted to know if some poor soul was crawling around in a pool of his own blood and feces because, God knows, I'd want someone to call me an ambulance if I'd heard about it. I did end up calling someone, but that came later. So, I just drove, not uttering a single word because I was terrified, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. This girl had all but admitted to shooting a man, and I had a creeping feeling she might do it again if it meant not getting to her grandparents, if there even were any grandparents. If it were me, I'd be thinking more about somewhere in South America than heading to Florida. I drove her all the way to the airport without a word. When we got close to the drop-off point, she told me to stop the car, saying she'd walk the rest of the way. I did as she asked, stopping the car in the darkness, away from the crowds. Then she asked me to turn off the engine and hand over my keys. I figured she wasn't about to shoot me so close to all those people, so at first, I said, "I can't do that, miss. I've got to make a living." But then, in a way that made my blood run ice cold, I think she showed me her true self for a second. I'd half turned my head as I told her I didn't want to give her my keys and was about to tell her I wouldn't say a word to anybody when she shoved the barrel of that gun right into my face. And when I say shoved, I don't mean she just pointed it. She pressed the muzzle into the skin of my temple so hard it hurt. Then she commanded, "Give me your keys." I had one last bit of resistance in me, one last appeal to her good nature. I tried to tell her, "You can't just take away a man's means of making money. How am I supposed to feed my kids if I can't drive my cab?" I didn't have any kids at the time, but I would have said just about anything to keep hold of my keys because I wasn't kidding when I said I needed them to make a living. But she didn't even let me get past, "You can't," before she exploded, ranting about how I wasn't allowed to tell her anything, how all men were the same, thinking they could control every woman, and how this one wasn't going to let that happen. She then repeated that I was to give her my keys, or I wouldn't be going home to see my non-existent kids that night, or any night for that matter. I'm not stupid. I knew the best thing to do from then on was to shut up and do as she told me. So, I handed over my keys, watched her climb out of my cab, then drag her suitcase out behind her. As she walked off towards the terminal, still projecting that "poor me" attitude she'd had when I first saw her, I waited until she was out of sight. Then, I rushed towards the terminal, to where the payphones were, and called 911, looking over my shoulder the whole time. I knew there might be airport security inside the terminal, but I also knew the girl wouldn't be too happy to see me there, and I didn't want to risk getting shot when I could just call the police from outside the building. I wasn't going anywhere. That girl had my keys, so I had to just sit outside the terminal and wait for the police to arrive. By the time they did, the girl had already boarded the first flight to the Bahamas, or wherever she went, having obviously disposed of the gun somehow, but not my car keys. I had to get help jump-starting my cab just to get home. My cab was essentially out of commission until the company could get a new key shipped. But I had my life, and after having that crazy person in my back seat, that felt like something truly special. Story 3, The Diner's Chilling Encounter. I used to be the area manager for a small chain of late-night diners here in Minnesota. Of all the strange incidents in my career, this was the most frightening. I wasn't at the diner the night it happened, but two of my employees were. It was a small, unassuming spot just off the highway, open 24 hours, surrounded by fields, woods, and a very lonely stretch of road. Jenny and Mike had both been working there for years when this occurred, but after that night, they both quit and only told the police what had happened. All I had to go on were the security footage and a few vague hints from the authorities. Years later, I still replay what I saw in my mind, still unable to fully comprehend it. I remember it being one of those brutal winter nights, the kind where the wind seemed to rattle the diner as if trying to force its way inside for a bowl of hot dish. Mike was our cook, a solid worker in his 40s with a wife and 2 kids, who took the night shift for the extra cash. Jenny was the waitress, a sharp-witted single mom in her 20s, excellent at managing the crowds on busier nights. They were both reliable, the kind of employees you could trust, capable of handling themselves. But that night, something walked into the diner that nothing could have prepared them for. I was at home, asleep, when a phone call jolted me awake. The moment they said it was the police, it was like a jolt of caffeine hitting me all at once. I listened as they explained there'd been an incident at the diner and that they needed access to the office to review the security tape. They didn't elaborate, just stated it was bad and that Mike and Jenny were involved. I dragged myself out of bed, my stomach churning with worry, then drove through the snow, my head spinning with questions. Was it a robbery? 2 groups of drunk customers who had started a brawl? Or was it something far more serious? By the time I arrived, I had a dozen theories, but what I witnessed on that tape was infinitely worse than anything I'd anticipated. At the diner, an officer in uniform was waiting for me. I led him to a cramped back office with an old, battered TV and a dusty VHS player. He said he'd need to take the tape as evidence but asked if we could watch it first so he could get a better idea of what transpired. I agreed, rewound the tape to the requested time, 2:30 a.m., and pressed play. On screen, the diner was quiet. Mike was in the kitchen, scrubbing counters, and Jenny was out front, wiping down tables in the dim light. Then, the door swung open, and 2 men walked in. They appeared to be in their late 20s or early 30s, dressed in faded jeans and thick jackets. But it wasn't their attire that put me on edge, it was their faces. One had a tattoo that snaked from his neck up onto his face, and the other possessed cold, hollow eyes that seemed to never blink. They initially behaved calmly, as if they were just a couple of drifters seeking a burger. They slid onto stools at the counter, and Jenny took their order. Mike cooked with his back to them, then Jenny brought out the plates. They kept to themselves while they ate, heads down, barely speaking. I kept hoping they would finish and leave. But, of course, they didn't. Suddenly, the man with the face tattoo reached into his hoodie and pulled out a handgun. The other followed suit, drawing his own. Both aimed at Mike and Jenny, who froze mid-motion like deer caught in headlights. Jenny's eyes widened, her face went slack, her mouth agape as if a scream was lodged in her throat. Mike's hands jerked upward, trembling so violently I could even see it on that grainy footage. The 2 men didn't rush. They motioned for Mike and Jenny to come out from behind the counter. They stumbled forward on shaky legs, Jenny clutching the edge of the counter for a second before letting go. The 2 men then herded them toward the back, towards the walk-in refrigerator. I assumed they'd lock them inside before raiding the register and the safe. But instead, after shoving Mike and Jenny inside, they stepped in after them and pulled the heavy door shut behind them. The camera remained fixed on that closed door. It stayed closed for 5, then 10, then 20 solid minutes. I had to fast forward the tape repeatedly, stopping and starting, but still, the door remained shut. My mind began to churn with questions. Why go inside with them? What the hell are they doing in there? I pictured Mike and Jenny in that freezing cold walk-in. 37 minutes is an incredibly long time to be trapped with 2 armed strangers in an inescapable box. The longer I watched, the stronger that feeling of dread became. My mind tried to fill in the blanks. Maybe they were threatening them, holding guns to their heads, forcing them to do unspeakable things. The walk-in was large, but only by fridge standards. There was barely room for 4 people to stand comfortably. Were Mike and Jenny standing there, shivering, too terrified to do anything but obey? The tape offered no clues. Finally, exactly 37 minutes after the walk-in door closed, it opened again. The two men stepped out, completely relaxed, as if they had just finished a bathroom break. The one with the face tattoo straightened his hoodie while the other scanned the room with those empty eyes. Then, they strolled back through the diner, not even glancing at the safe in the office or the cash register stuffed with bills. They didn't take a single thing, not a dime, not a burger, nothing. They headed for the door, moving casually, as if what they had just done was the most normal thing in the world. Then they slipped out, climbed into a dark car parked just out of frame, and vanished into the snowy night. I sat there next to the police officer, my hands clammy, my heart pounding hard and fast in my chest. They hadn't stolen anything. They had held two people at gunpoint for over half an hour in a freezing walk-in and walked away empty-handed. At least, that's how it appeared on the surface. But why? What did they do to Mike and Jenny in there? The tape continued. About 15 minutes later, one of our regulars shuffled in, a truck driver who always came for coffee at odd hours. He looked around the empty diner, his coat dusted with snow. After a few minutes of waiting, he wandered behind the counter, probably wondering where everyone was. He then did the same thing in the back, just sort of tentatively moving around for a few minutes. Then, after maybe 10 to 15 minutes of checking everywhere but the walk-in, he finally cracked it open and peered inside. I could pinpoint the exact moment he saw something. He reeled backward. His face wasn't clearly visible on that camera at first, but as he stumbled away, another camera caught his expression, and he looked utterly ghost-stricken. Back in the dining area, he fumbled for his phone and began dialing 911. Immediately afterward, he darted to the grills and shut them off, a thoughtful gesture to prevent a fire, bless his heart. Then, he paced frantically as he spoke on the phone, casting nervous glances at the fridge, his shoulders hunched as if expecting something to burst out of it. Two police officers arrived minutes later. They spoke to the regular, then approached the fridge. One officer nudged the door open with his boot, seemingly yelling something, making a "come out" gesture. Then, Jenny staggered out, her hands pressed over her eyes, shaking so violently that one of the officers had to support her. Mike followed soon after, his own hands clamped tightly against his face, but he moved differently, slower, as if uncertain about leaving the walk-in. Suddenly, as the officers were guiding him away, Mike twisted back from them, then, with one hand still covering his face, he reached for the door and tried to go back inside. The officers yanked him backward, but Mike struggled to re-enter the walk-in as if his life depended on it. As the police dealt with Mike's bizarre outburst, Jenny collapsed into a booth, curling into a ball, her hands still shielding her face. A few minutes later, the officers seemed to calm Mike down and were able to lead him to a booth and sit him down. The police then tried to speak with them, kneeling and gesturing, but it appeared they got nothing. Mike and Jenny remained catatonic, their hands over their eyes, as if they had witnessed something so horrific they couldn't bear to look at anything else. It was chilling to watch them shatter without a single word. It was almost as if whatever had happened in that fridge had terrified them beyond belief. A little while later, a couple of EMTs rushed in. They spoke to Mike and Jenny for a bit, then escorted them both to an ambulance. But even outside, Jenny and Mike kept their hands clamped over their faces. One officer remained behind, scribbling notes. Then, I saw myself on the tape, bursting in, my coat half-buttoned, my face tight with worry. When the tape cut off, I felt sick to my stomach. I remember turning to the detective, demanding to know what had transpired in that walk-in. But he just shrugged. Mike and Jenny were in shock and weren't speaking yet. There were no obvious physical injuries either, so, apparently, my guess was as good as his. The men hadn't beaten or cut them, but whatever they did had psychologically shattered them. The officer told me they were searching for answers, but that was all they knew so far. After securing the diner behind me, I left in a horrified daze. Mike and Jenny were my people. I cared about them, and hearing they'd endured something so terrible broke my heart. I tried visiting them at the hospital the next morning, but the staff turned me away. Then I tried calling their homes in the days that followed, but neither wanted to speak with me. One by one, over the weeks that followed, they both quit the diner. I later heard Mike move to California, abandoning his wife and kids. She told me he was a wreck in the days before he left, barely talking, sleeping, or eating. Then one day, poof, he was gone. Jenny fled to a farm in Iowa with family, trying to put herself back together. Her mom later told me she was doing much better, but she still only spoke in short, clipped sentences. The police report was a dead end, too, only referring to what had happened as an incident with no specifics. The diner itself changed after that. Staff at the other branches began gossiping, some calling it a gang thing, others swearing it was some twisted game they played for fun. One cook even muttered about a government conspiracy, which I, of course, brushed off. No one knew what truly happened to Jenny and Mike except Jenny and Mike, but the not knowing just made it worse. Customers stopped coming at night, scared off by the rumors, and I couldn't blame them. I hated being there too, standing in a place where something so terrible had obviously occurred. I added a night guard, triple-checked the cameras, and had panic buttons installed, but it felt like an empty gesture. The damage had already been done. Time dragged on. We hired new staff, and the night customers slowly trickled back. But I never forgot what happened there. I'd drive by at night, see the neon sign flickering, and wonder who those men were. Sometimes I'd watch that tape back on my home computer, letting those 37 minutes just roll by. Sometimes it went fast, other times it felt like an eternity. Were they still out there, planning something else? And what was it they did in the first place that broke Mike and Jenny so badly? Eventually, I stopped watching the tape and taught myself to stop asking questions, too. Because these days, I feel like I'm better off not knowing. Story 4, The Unseen Abduction of Jessica Herringa. On the evening of April 26, 2013, 25-year-old Jessica Herringa, a young mother, was working the late-night shift at the Exxon gas station on Sternberg Road in Norton Shores, Michigan. The small, unassuming station was a familiar stop for locals, and Jessica, known for her warm smile and dedication, was working alone at the time. Such solo shifts were a common practice at this Exxon. Norton Shores boasted a very low crime rate compared to the rest of the state, and with the nearby Fruitport Police Department just a few minutes' drive away, Exxon employees, including Jessica, felt safe working alone and unarmed. Just before 11 p.m., one of the station's regulars pulled his car into the forecourt, shut off the engine, and walked inside to make a purchase. Upon entering, he found no one at the counter. Assuming the clerk was taking a bathroom break, he decided to wait. But when several minutes passed, and only an eerie silence emanated from the back of the store, he grew concerned. Being familiar with the gas station and its staff, and suspecting an emergency, the customer decided to step behind the counter and look around. In the back of the store, he found Jessica's purse, her jacket, and other personal belongings, but no Jessica. After calling out her name a few times and circling the store to ensure she wasn't nearby, the regular customer called the police. Minutes later, an officer from the nearby department arrived and began inspecting the gas station. There were no signs of any struggle, which initially suggested Jessica had simply walked out for some reason, perhaps with the contents of the cash register. But when the officer opened it, all $400 and change sat neatly untouched. The same could be said for the station safe. If nothing in the store had been disturbed and all of Jessica's belongings had been left behind, where was she? Jessica was more than just a gas station clerk. She was a devoted mother to her beloved 3-year-old son, Zine, and was engaged to her fiancé, Dakota Quayle Dyer. Friends and family described her as kind-hearted and ambitious, dreaming of becoming an accountant while working her way through college. As you can imagine, this made her a very popular figure among Norton Shores residents, so her sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through a close-knit community unaccustomed to such chilling and unexpected events. Her family, particularly her mother, Shelley Herringa, were devastated. "I know she's out there, and I know she's waiting for us to find her," she told a local journalist. "I just want my baby back. It's like a nightmare that you don't wake up from. You just want answers." Dakota Quayle Dyer, Jessica's fiancé, also spoke to local media at a vigil held in the aftermath of her disappearance. "I just want her to come home. I miss her, and our son misses her," he said. "Every day is hard, and we're not giving up. She's out there somewhere." The Norton Shores Police Department launched an immediate investigation, but to their frustration, the lack of physical evidence at the scene posed significant challenges. As mentioned, there were no signs of a struggle inside the gas station. Shockingly, police found a complete absence of interior surveillance cameras on the property, meaning no footage could explain what happened to Jessica. They were stunned, but when asked why they hadn't covered the interior of the building, its owner claimed they didn't think such intense surveillance was required. Obviously, it was far too late to do anything but reprimand their naivety, but it revealed a shocking level of ineptitude that made the investigation infinitely more difficult. Instead of relying on security camera footage, police turned to other methods of tracking Jessica's movements. A K9 unit was deployed to track her scent, but the trail ended abruptly, suggesting she may have been taken away in a vehicle. A small spot of blood was then found outside the station's back door, and when this was confirmed to be a match for Jessica, it indicated a worrying possibility of fatal foul play. The police then conducted interviews with customers and employees alike and were once again shocked to learn that a young female had been left to work alone and was therefore extremely vulnerable to late-night predators. With a lack of solid evidence, police prepared themselves for the difficult job ahead. But as days turned into weeks, the investigation ground to a complete standstill. Extensive searches of the surrounding area were conducted, including wooded regions and nearby lakes, but despite numerous civilian volunteers joining law enforcement efforts, no trace of Jessica was ever found. In an inspiring display of community spirit, the people of Norton Shores rallied together, organizing vigils, distributing flyers, and plastering the city with missing person posters. Local media covered the case relentlessly, and Jessica's story gained the attention of national TV shows like Disappeared. Yet, with no witnesses to attest to what had happened and no significant leads, the case grew cold, leaving Jessica's family in an agonizing limbo, unsure if she was alive or dead. For nearly 3 years, the question of what happened to Jessica remained a haunting puzzle weighing heavily on the people of Norton Shores. But in 2016, a seemingly unrelated incident provided the spark that would reignite her case. On April 16, a 16-year-old girl reported being the victim of a terrifying abduction attempt in Muskegon County. She described being approached by a man in a silver minivan who then tried luring her into his vehicle. Her quick thinking allowed her to escape, and she was able to provide police with critical details, including a description of the suspect and his van. The girl's report led investigators to a man named Jeffrey Willis, a 46-year-old factory worker. Despite having no criminal history, Mr. Willis was far from innocent. During a search of Willis's home and silver Chrysler minivan, police officers unearthed a frightening amount of highly disturbing evidence. Not only did Willis's van match descriptions from witnesses who reported seeing a similar vehicle near the Exxon station on the night Jessica disappeared, but its contents were enough to chill the blood of even the most veteran officer. Handcuffs, ropes, chains, and leather restraints proved merely the tip of the iceberg. Willis claimed all these items were perfectly legal, as were the handgun, the insulin, the Viagra, and the plastic gloves police discovered. But what was not so easy to explain was the folder on Willis's laptop that he'd simply titled VIX. Upon opening the folder, digital forensics experts noticed two subfolders, one titled JLH and the other titled RB. Then, after opening the RB folder, experts found photographs of a woman named Rebecca Bletch. On Sunday, June 29, 2014, a fellow jogger discovered Rebecca's lifeless body on a regular route less than a mile from her home near Muskegon County's Automobile Road. While she was originally thought to be the victim of a hit-and-run, investigators soon discovered that Becky had been shot 3 times in the back of the head. Rebecca's loved ones were devastated by her murder, but they held out hope that justice would one day come. Willis's arrest and the seizure of his laptop marked the end of that wait. Not only did Willis's VIX folder contain a multitude of photographs that Rebecca herself had uploaded to social media, but it also contained thousands of torture and snuff videos, revealing a disturbing and deeply seated obsession with violent fantasies. Perhaps even more disturbing was a small detail regarding the folder titled JLH, because in addition to containing dozens of photographs depicting Jessica Herringa, the date of its creation was April 26, 2013, the very same day that Jessica disappeared. Naturally, Jeff Willis became the prime suspect in Jessica's disappearance, as in addition to what was found on his laptop, surveillance footage from a nearby business captured his silver minivan speeding away from the Sternberg Road Exxon at around 11 p.m. on the night in question. Additionally, a police sketch created from descriptions of a suspicious man spotted near the station that night bore a striking resemblance to Willis. It was later uncovered that the suspect had a lengthy history of harassing vulnerable females at their places of work. Witnesses who had earlier reported nothing suspicious on the night of Jessica's disappearance later recalled Willis as a regular customer at the Exxon. Most saw nothing but bothersome attempts at flirtation, but it made Jessica feel deeply uneasy all the same. Finally, on September 20, 2016, Jeff Willis was officially charged with Jessica Herringa's kidnap and murder. Prosecutors accused him of abducting her from the gas station before transporting her to his grandfather's vacant house. There, Jessica was subjected to a series of sadistic brutalities before she was executed with the same .357 Taurus found in Willis's van. The gun's serial number was partially filed off, but forensic analysts were easily able to link it to Willis through DNA tests. The JLH file on his computer, along with the bondage equipment and snuff videos police recovered, painted a chilling picture of a monster who meticulously planned his murders. In a shocking turn of events, Willis's cousin, a former correctional officer named Kevin Bloom, admitted he had helped dispose of Jessica's body after being shown her remains in his cousin's basement. It was Bloom's belated cooperation that proved critical to the case against his cousin. In May 2018, Willis was tried for Jessica's murder, although it should be noted that he was already serving life without parole for his 2017 conviction for the killing of Rebecca Bletch. However, in Jessica's case, the prosecution faced a unique challenge. Since Jessica's body has never been found, it became a no-body murder case, which legal experts everywhere agree are notoriously difficult to prove. But at least the sheer volume of circumstantial evidence was positively overwhelming. Willis's silver minivan, his VIX folder, along with the surveillance footage and witness testimony, all pointed to his irrefutable guilt. On top of that, one of Willis's co-workers testified that he actually boasted of his knowledge of corpse disposal following a lengthy period of research, something the jury found very damning indeed. Willis's defense team argued that the lack of physical evidence, such as Jessica's DNA being found in his residence or on his clothing, created substantial reasonable doubt. They also suggested alternative theories to explain Jessica's disappearance, including the possibility that she had vanished voluntarily due to dissatisfaction with her job and relationships. However, the jury found the prosecution's case so compelling that it took just an hour and a half of deliberation to find Willis guilty of kidnapping and first-degree murder. The news that he had been sentenced to life in prison was met with tears of relief from Jessica's family, who had endured years of pain and uncertainty. Yet despite the conviction, one agonizing question remained: where was Jessica's body? Kevin Bloom, who pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact, claimed he helped Willis bury her in a wooded area near Sheridan and Lecon roads. He led police to several locations, but to their disappointment, extensive searches, including excavations and cadaver dog sweeps, yielded no results. Having clearly expected his cousin to implicate him, Willis had the foresight to dig up Jessica's remains before moving them to a second location. After that, all Bloom could do was give the police his best guesses. And after compiling a list of potential burial sites, over a dozen were investigated, from rural properties to abandoned lots. But sadly, Jessica's remains were never found. Jessica Herringa, Jessica's mother, has spoken publicly about the pain of not knowing where her daughter is, but has vowed to continue the search. Local volunteers have also refused to give up, and driven by a collective desire to bring Jessica home, have since organized efforts to comb through potential burial sites. Jessica's disappearance not only had a profound impact on the residents of Norton Shores, but it also exposed the glaring vulnerabilities in workplace safety for late-night workers. In response, Michigan lawmakers signed the Jessica Herringa Act into law in 2016, which mandates enhanced safety measures for gas stations and convenience stores, such as requiring multiple employees on late shifts, installing panic buttons, and ensuring full 24/7 surveillance. The local community also continues to honor Jessica through annual vigils and fundraisers for her son, Zine, who is being raised by his father and grandmother in the wake of her loss. Jessica's murder robbed Norton Shores of its innocence and serves as a reminder of how devastating violent crime can be. But it also gives us many reasons to be hopeful, whether it be the courage of the 16-year-old who escaped a similarly grisly fate, the dedication of investigators, or the resilience of Jessica's family. There are many such examples of good people pushing back against the darkness. But Jessica's absence and the failure to bring home her remains leave an open wound. Jeff Willis, now serving multiple life sentences, remains completely unrepentant and has offered no further clues to Jessica's whereabouts. Perhaps one day he will. But until then, the memory of the incident remains a somber chapter in Norton Shores history. It's a testament to the pain of unresolved loss, but it's also a testament to the strength of those who refuse to give up. Thank you for watching, friends. I hope these stories offered a glimpse into the chilling realities of working the night shift. Stay safe out there.